Hi, and welcome to the podcast Making Sense, brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. I'm your host, Emily Bigham, and each week I'll be taking your questions to the experts to help you make sense of your money, pun intended. Welcome back to Making Sense. Today we're going to break down one of the most common financial decisions that many families face, buying a car. Today, to talk about this topic, is Joe Pendergast. He's the Vice President of Consumer Lending Originations and Processing here at Navy Federal, and Kevin Wince, Vice President of Consumer Lending Servicing, Projects, and Risk. Good morning and welcome to the podcast.
Morning. Thank you for having us.
Hey, good morning, Emily. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I'm excited about this topic. I don't know a ton about car buying, or I guess I should say leasing. I'm in the camp of buying a car, but I do know a lot of people who like to lease. So first, I'd just like to talk about, what are the benefits to leasing versus buying a car?
So there are benefits to leasing. I think first and foremost, typically a lower monthly payment, which is very attractive. You usually get a lower monthly payment with a lease. There are other benefits. I would say people like leasing because they can drive a new car or almost a new car every 2 or 3 years, depending on, what the lease term. So you get to enjoy the latest technology, right? Technology in vehicles is taking off today. So every couple of years, there's brand new technology. So if you're constantly leasing, you get to enjoy that the new technology that comes out. You get that that new car smell, if you will, every few years.
So if leasing was such a great option, why do so many people buy their cars? Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal decision, right? And one that I get asked by friends and family the most. And it often is based on kind of where you are in your situation. And I'll give my own personal situation. Back in 2008, I had just left my realtor's office, signed my name in 20 different places to make the biggest purchase of my life. At that point, it was my first home. And driving home from my realtor's office, my car broke down. And after doing the evaluation, the cost to repair my car was not worth it given the value of my vehicle. So I went to the dealership, and given I had just made this financial commitment for my first home, I was looking for lower payment at that time, and I ended up getting a lease. Now, at that point, it was a great decision. However, life happened, and I got a new job. I had to drive more. I got into hiking. I started driving, going out into the mountains a little bit more. And at the end of the lease, I had driven more than the lease had allotted, and therefore had to pay, on average, it's about 10 to 50 cents per mile for every mile that I had driven over. And I had also had some excessive wear on my vehicle. So for me, it was the right time to lease the car. However, with hindsight being 2020, and the situation's always evolving, buying would have been the better option. I would have had more flexibility. I would have been able to drive as much or as little as I want. And I would have been able to own that car at the end. Of course, after that lease, I had to come out of pocket a lot of money, and then I had to get into my next vehicle and start paying for that. So I think one of the big advantages from a financial perspective or just general wealth building perspective is the ability to complete those payments at a certain point of time, and having that sense of completion and satisfaction and ownership, and then using that car for however long, having no payment, and being able to save up for your next vacation or your next home improvement, and then also having that asset, the vehicle, that then you could use as equity to put down as a down payment on your next vehicle.
I see. So it sounds like, up front at first, it might seem attractive to lease a car. Like you said, Joe, lower monthly payments, no resale worries. But at the end of the day, you don't have an asset in your hands, right? So to me, it kind of sounds almost like home buying, right? The decision between renting and buying a home. And that's something that you really have to plan for. And, perhaps for car buying, you should really think about it in the long term. I was really fortunate that my dad basically didn't, he was like, you're buying a car, right? It makes sense at the end of the day, after you pay it off, like you said, you have an asset, you can go put that money down to a new car. And that's exactly what I did actually in 2020, like you mentioned. And just given the economic environment, we were in the pandemic, people were buying used cars. The used car market was really hot. And so buying a new car was actually a better option. So having made that decision at the beginning of my car buying journey really helped me out, and thankful for that. So similar to home buying, should you get a pre-approval before you go to a car dealership? I know for me personally, it was the pandemic. My dad and I just, bored one day, and I was like, why don't we just go test drive, this car? Who knows? Maybe there will be some great deals out there. I've been reading about it. And that's how I ended up with a new car.
Yeah, so some people just know what they want. You have a car in mind. You know what color you want. You know which features you want on it, right? So you know which dealership to go to. You're going to go find that car. You're going to test drive it, and then you're going to drive it off the lot. Other times, some folks just aren't quite sure what they want. They might be undecided between a couple of different models or a couple of different brands, and that's okay. And in that scenario where the buyer is unsure, we offer what we call a PAL, or a pre-approved loan. And that is where the member can come in and get pre-approved for a certain amount, up to a certain amount. And then they're given what we call a draft, where they can take that in to the dealership. Once they finally decide which car they want to buy, they can use that draft to pay the dealer the purchase price of that vehicle. And sometimes you'll find that dealers are willing to maybe negotiate on price a little more.
So what about loan terms? Is there a certain length of time that you should look out for? With mortgages, it's usually 15 years, 30 years. Is there a certain amount of time you should be looking for car loans?
So the average loan term today is about 72 months. 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, it was 60 months, but that is now 72 months. Ideally, you want to take as short a term as possible. And that's because, the longer the term, the more you're going to pay in interest over that term of the loan. If you can afford it, if you can make the higher payment for a shorter amount of time, you're much better off.
So Kevin, when you go into the dealership, are there certain things that you should look out for? Because I know that when you're there, you're buying the car, there are going to be options that the dealership will probably provide you as far as financing, but also, Navy Federal has financing. So can you explain to me the difference between that and what a consumer should look for or watch out for?
Yeah, when you're going to the dealership and you're going to make the purchase of a vehicle, obviously purchase price is something to pay close attention to, and interest rate as well. And I think it's one thing that probably people don't do enough when they're at the dealership. It's easy just to move into the finance man or woman's office and kind of go through the process and start, okay, the interest rate. Yep. Okay, whatever. I'll take this option. I'll take that option. But it's good to shop around. And in Navy Federal, we're a direct lender. So as Joe was talking about, we'll refinance from anywhere. So pay attention to interest rate. And then there are some optional things that you could consider. So, for example, the Guaranteed Asset Protection product, or GAP. This is a product that when you're owning a vehicle and you are in the unfortunate situation where your vehicle is totaled, this product will cover the difference between what the insurance company pays out for your total vehicle and what the loan value is left on that vehicle. And at a dealership, based on our market research and analysis that we've done, it is considerably a more expensive product to buy through the dealership versus us. In our competitive research, our cost is $499 with Navy Federal to our members, and from a benefits and services that go along with it, it's a best-in-class product. So pay attention to that. And just a short story, I had the opportunity to work in a branch for 2 days as part of an executive leadership program here at the Navy Federal Credit Union. And during that 2 days, I remember a young woman came in. She was in the military. And a few months ago, she had just purchased a new vehicle for her. It was a used vehicle. And she came in and she wanted to find ways to lower her payment. It was getting to be too expensive and she was having trouble affording it. So some of the first questions that the member service representative and I asked were, how much is your loan amount and what's your interest rate? She actually wasn't sure of what her interest rate was. So we had her open up her banking mobile app and she pulled it up and it was in the mid 30%. And she said, "Is that good?" We said, "We can help you and do a lot better." We went through the process and got her approved for that refinance and ended up cutting her interest rate by more than half, saved her hundreds of dollars per month, and she was able to obtain the $200 Navy Federal refinance bonus. And she just left and gave us hugs and was as happy as a person as I've ever seen. And it was a great story, and it's a great core memory of how we help our members and just things to really pay attention to and focus that can really make a substantial difference in people's lives.
And speaking of our members, I do want to get into auto financing for the military community. They have a lot of unique things to consider when buying a car, right? You're moving around a lot. I know for me personally, my dad was in the Navy. Every couple of years, we're stationed in a new place in the U.S., but also we were in Japan at one point. And this conversation is actually reminding me of when we were in Japan. The families over there, someone had purchased a car, and then as the families would kind of go in and out of Yokosuka, we would just buy the car from the next family and so on and so forth. So that's another area where, having that asset makes a lot of sense, right? You're driving on the other side of the road. There's no reason for us to take this van, which was a very interesting van, let me tell you, probably 15 years old. But, to me, it would make sense to purchase a car. But can you talk a little bit about what those special considerations might be, Joe, for service members who are moving around or even purchasing overseas?
Well, so I'll give some high-level advice of what specifically military members should be doing. So first and foremost, I would suggest and highly recommend that visit a franchise dealership. A franchise dealership is going to typically look out for your best interest. They've got a reputation that they need to stand behind. So that's very important. We do offer what we call a military or active duty discount for those personnel that are in the military, and that's a 25 basis point discount on your loan. We also have what we call a senior enlisted program discount, which would apply to an auto loan, and that's for those members of the military that are E7 through E9, and they get 100 basis points discount off of their loan. But any other advice? I think if I was in the military, and this not only for military, but for anybody buying a used car, typically military members, they're much younger. They are first-time buyers, which we like to do. We like to take care of these young military members. If you're going to buy a used vehicle, I would say to look for a certified pre-owned vehicle. And again, this is something you can get at a franchise dealership. And there's a lot of benefits behind that. If you typically get a certified pre-owned vehicle, that comes with a extended warranty. There might be a maintenance package that comes with that. And you just generally get peace of mind because you know what you're getting.
Yeah, those are really great points, Joe. And talked to a lot of people in the military. My dad is a veteran. Both my grandfathers were veterans. And I think one of the things that often comes up is the idea of permanent change of station and PCSing, right? And, for the average military member, the PCS period is 2 to 4 years. And at the surface, I think many people can think leasing is the right answer, right? It's the same term. I'll move to a new state or city, and then I'll just get a new car there. However, through military transportation offices or other like services in the military, they may pay for the transportation of one of your vehicles to get moved to the new location. And in addition, the other thing I hear from a lot of military people that may live on base and drive very little, they think, okay, well, I don't have to worry about the mileage restriction, right? So whether that mileage restriction on a lease is 10,000 miles or 12,500 miles or 15,000 miles, it's often I'll never get close to that. And what I'd say is that you are paying for those miles in advance. So if you are significantly underutilizing those miles, you're actually paying for a part of the car that you're not using and you're not getting the full value of it. So definitely pay attention to that. And in those instances, purchasing, which ultimately will end with you owning the vehicle, may be a better option.
Yeah, and staying on this lease topic, I know we touched on the benefits of leasing, and Kevin has touched on one or two of the cons of leasing, or reasons why you might want to lease. Specifically, he gave the story of the mileage. But even starting with the lease, at lease inception, you're going to pay more upfront cost than you would if you buy. But typically, at lease inception, you're going to be required to make a down payment. You're going to have a security deposit. You're going to have typically your first month's payment due. And many times there's an acquisition fee. That's just on the front end. Okay. Then your lease ends. Okay. But wait, there's more. There's the potential wear and tear cost. Okay. There's the mileage, excess mileage fee that Kevin had alluded to. And then there is also typically a lease termination fee, which can be anywhere from $300 to $500. So I just wanted to drive that home, that while leasing, again, can be attractive, looks attractive, these are also things to think about.
It's such a good point. And just to add on, if you're going to lease a vehicle, the contract is so important to pay attention to. Read it thoroughly, understand it, ask questions if you're going down that road, because it can lead to a lot of, I didn't realize that at the end. And I know a world where I get so many terms and conditions from many online realtors that I use or companies that I use. It's so easy just to be like, accept or sign and move on, but really, really pay attention, especially if you're going outside of those franchise dealers like Joe mentioned.
You guys said a lot of really interesting things there. And one thing I want to go back to is, Kevin, you mentioned that if you're in the military and you're moving, possibly they might cover the cost of shipping for your car. That happened to me back in 2020 when I purchased my car. I was out in California visiting my parents when I bought a car, which, I think a lot of people are surprised. Why would you do that? You live in Virginia. But I was able to negotiate not only the cost of them, they paid to ship the car to Virginia, but they also altered the tax because I said, well, I could just buy this in Virginia and the tax would be lowered. And so they, lowered the tax. So I really feel like if you go in and you know what you want and you have a budget that, they will work with you. And then some of those hidden costs that you mentioned, that's why I like to bank with, credit unions, right? There's no hidden costs. We are not for profit. All the money that we make goes back to our members in the forms of low rates. So you don't have to be concerned about, the dealership taking a percentage of what you're paying or those costs being inflated. So I think, those are all really smart things to think about, the upfront costs. And then sometimes I think about my car as almost my rainy day fund in a way. I mean, not that I have money out of my car, but, if anything happens and you do need money or you need to pay for a big purchase, there's always that thought in my head, like, okay, well, at the end of the day, if everything goes downhill, I can always sell my car. Not that I plan on doing that, but it's just nice to know that when you have an asset, that is something that you can factor in future financial decisions. So Joe, do you have any car buying stories for us? Because I feel like Kevin and I have, talked a lot about some of our experiences. What about you? What was your first car?
Oh, my first car was and I don't even remember what year, it had to be in the early 80s, was a Ford Escort. And that was an interesting interaction. I went in, thinking I know everything when I knew nothing about the car buying process. The dealer, I'm sure, saw me coming from a mile away. This, I don't know, 18-year-old kid who doesn't know a thing. And but at the end of the day, I chose a franchise dealer. I don't believe they took too much advantage of me because, again, that's what you get with a franchise dealership versus an independent. If it was an independent dealer, it might have been a different story. But Um, speaking of just dealers in general, anecdotally, they typically don't like Navy Federal too much. And that's because of the relationship we have with our members, the trust and the affinity that we have with our members. Many times, I used to work in the indirect world, so I had, a lot of dealers I would call on, and I still know some of these dealers out there, and occasionally I'll call them, or they'll even call me, and they'll say, "Hey, Joe, I don't like you guys over there. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Mike, what are you talking about?" He said, "I just had one of your members in here. They had one of your PAL drafts. They bought a car. I told them I could get them out the door today within an hour at a rate that was just slightly below yours, maybe 25 basis points different." And that member was adamant. He did not care about the rate difference, but he was adamant he was going to stay with Navy Federal because he knew we had his back. He knew he could trust us. And that speaks volumes, and that pays dividends. And that's something that you're not going to get typically in the banking world.
Yes, the relationship and the loyalty, it goes a long way. So, we've talked about buying or leasing and at, different stages of people's life, but what about shopping at the right time? So, I've heard about the car buying season, but I do know with, the rates going up and all this talk of tariffs, is there still a right time to shop for a car, Kevin?
I think the answer is yes and no. There are going to be certain times when you don't have an option, in the unfortunate situation when your car is totaled, or if it's stolen, or if it breaks down and the value isn't worth the repair like I had 17 years ago. There are certain times where you just don't have an option. On the more positive side, if you have a child turning 16 or 17 and you want to get them a car to help them get to and from work, you may have to buy. In those situations, there are general opportunities to buy later in the month where the salesmen and women may have to meet quotas or certain numbers, and you may be able to get better deals towards the end. But right now we have seen an uptick in sales to try to get ahead of some of the tariffs that will be coming. A lot of the manufacturers are still offering some level of discount. Some are eating the additional tariff costs as of now. So yeah, I think if you're looking to buy a new car and you're like, hey, sometime this year, I'd like to buy a car, I think now's definitely a good time. And if rates go down next year, or whatever it may be, there are always refinance opportunities at no cost that we do here at Navy Federal to get you in a lower rate and try to even lower your payment.
I think, I was just going to agree with Kevin that, it depends when you're talking about, is it time to buy a car? It all depends. Right now, there's still a lot of demand for cars in the U.S., right? U.S. new car sales this year is expected to be just over 16 million units. And that's the highest number since the pandemic. So that's good. That is a good sign. But on the flip side, right, there's still inflation, right? There's still other macroeconomic pressures that consumers are facing. There's now the uncertainty with the tariffs, right? And there's still some just general hangover from the pandemic. So consumers are being more cautious these days because of those things. So they're not so quick to pull the trigger on big ticket items like vehicles, electronics, appliances, vacations, those things. But demand is there. If we can just get over this hump, then I think, maybe going into 2026, 2027, we'll see some good years.
That's a good sign. That's great. So, Joe, if for any members out there who are looking to buy a car, how does the pre-approval process work? They just go online. What information do they need?
Yeah, you can go online, you can visit a branch. It's just like any other loan application. You're going to provide your name, your residence, how much you would like to apply for. And then we are going to run your credit. And typically decisions can be made within a matter of minutes. We are very quick to please here at Navy Federal. And then you can have your PAL draft, mailed to you or overnighted if you'd like to get out and shop as quickly as possible.
And how long does it last for?
The PAL is good for 90 days. So that gives you plenty of time to shop. And also, I want to add that if you're shopping for a used car and you apply for a PAL, we are going to provide you 2 complimentary Carfax vehicle history reports. So if you think you found a car, we're going to give you a link to go enter that VIN, and you can pull a Carfax report on there. So you know the history of that vehicle and you know if it's in good shape.
That's great. So this has been a really great conversation. I've learned a lot about leasing versus buying. I think I'm still in the buying camp. Is there anything else that you still would like to talk about, Kevin or Joe? Anything that we missed today?
No, this has been great. It's been a pleasure doing this. Kevin and I, we are very excited for the car buying season here at Navy Federal, and thank you for having us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Emily. Great to be here. Enjoyed the conversation. This is what we love. We love helping our members, as you mentioned, as a not-for-profit member-owned company. Our members are the mission, and we look forward to serving anyone who's in the market to purchase a car in the future through our 24/7 contact center that we have, or more than 360 branches across the world, and our fantastic digital experiences that we have online. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Navy Federal Credit Union is federally insured by the National Credit Union Administration. This podcast is intended to provide general information and shouldn't be considered legal, tax, or financial advice. It's always a good idea to consult a tax or financial professional for specific information on how certain laws may apply to your individual financial situation. References to and participation with the military community does not constitute organizational endorsement. Navy Federal is an equal housing lender. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission.